Welcome to M&A Power in Practice, the podcast for all things M&A. This podcast is a tool for education, information, and making your collective voice heard as members of the Minnesota Nurses Association. Our first episode is on understanding your Weingarten rights, presented by M&A labor educator Kathy McQuillan.
Hi everyone, it's Kathy McQuillan, the labor educator at M&A. I am responsible for training our stewards both in person and online, as well as I do the chair training, and today I'll be doing the training with you for your Weingarten rights as a member. And today's M&A podcast is to help you understand your rights. If your manager asks you to come to a meeting in their office, technically it's called Understanding Your Weingarten Rights in Investigatory Meetings. It does matter why your manager is asked to speak to you in their office. Under your union Weingarten rights, you have the right to know why they've asked to speak to you. Why? So you know if this is a routine conversation between a manager and a nurse, or is the subject of the meeting something that could lead to discipline now or later. I want you to understand the different conversations that could happen and educate you on the ones where a union steward should be present. First, let me explain what are your Weingarten rights and then how to exercise them. Weingarten rights were won many years ago in a case that went before the U.S. Supreme Court for all union members so they could have a steward with them when questioned by management on a subject that could lead to discipline. There are 4 points regarding this. 1, only union members have Weingarten rights, so this would be all nurses covered by an M&A contract. Number 2, the right to know the subject of the meeting in advance. So nurses have the right to know why your manager wants to meet with you. Number 3, the right to union representation in a meeting that could result in discipline. And number 4, members must request representation. You have to tell your manager, I want a steward. So there are 4 ways that management might approach you to come meet with them. The first one would be in person. You're up at the nurse's desk. The manager comes up and says, can you stop in my office? I need to talk to you about something. Hopefully the manager has told you what that is about, but just in case they don't, you have the right to say, what is this meeting about? If the manager says it's about your schedule request, that's a normal meeting and you should go in and talk to your manager. If the manager says, well, I need to talk to you about your attendance, that is something that could lead to discipline either now or in the future. And so at that point, you should say, I need to find a union steward before I will meet with you. And this meeting can be rescheduled even though the manager wants to meet with you at a certain time that particular day. And generally, we have about 48 hours to reach out to find a steward and get these meetings rescheduled. The second way you might be approached is you get a work email from your manager saying, will you come talk to me at the beginning of your shift tomorrow? Again, hopefully the manager has told you what the subject is about. Otherwise, respond with an email saying, what is the meeting for? Once the manager tells you, then you can decide if it's about a schedule request, you can respond that you're going to meet with them. If it's about your attendance, you would want to say, I will meet with you once I find a steward. And that's all you really need to say, and then it's up to you to call and find a union steward. The third way is you could be approached by your manager is getting a phone call at home. So let me explain that a little bit. If you're at home and you're not working, you're not on call, then you would have the right to not even answer the phone. If you do answer the phone and the manager asks to speak to you at that time, you do have the right, again, to say, what is this about? If the manager says it's about your vacation request, my guess is you're going to want to talk to them, and that's fine. But if he or she says it's about your attendance, again, you have the right to say, I need to find a steward, and I will get back to you. It may be that day, it may not, but you do have the right to take the time to find a union steward. If they do call you at home and they do say it's about your attendance, you also have the right to say, I don't want to talk to you about this today. I'll talk to you the next time at work and we can set up a meeting. But just so you know, I will be bringing a union steward. The fourth example is what we call the blind side. You're at the nurse's desk, the manager approaches you, they want to talk to you about your schedule. You aren't busy at that moment, so you go in their office and you have a nice conversation. You think that it's almost done. You get up to leave, and then the manager says, oh, by the way, I want to talk to you for another minute. I need to talk to you about your attendance. That's what we call the blind side. They get you in the office on one thing, and then towards the end, they add something else. And usually the second thing they add is something that you're going to need a union steward, especially if it's attendance, right? So in that moment, you need to say, I need to find a steward. Now, the manager might say, you don't need a steward. You're not in trouble. Just want to tell you something. Doesn't matter. Anytime they start onto a subject on something that could lead to discipline, you have the right to have a steward present for all that meeting. Now, hopefully your manager will respect that and not continue to talk. But if they do, they continue to either talk to you or ask you questions, you have the right to not answer any of those questions or to not even talk at all. You can sit there or stand there. If you want to say something, you can just say, I want a union steward. I'm asking for a union steward. You don't have the right to get up and leave the office until the manager says the meeting's over, but you do have the right to not say anything. And if that ever happens to you, you need to contact one of the chairs right away to let them know that occurred, and they can help you with the next steps. So in all those examples, remember, management's asking you for a meeting. If it is something that leads to discipline, that first example that they give of when they want to meet with you does not mean you have to go in there if you can't find a union steward. Sometimes it takes a while to find a union steward who is free to come with you. So let's talk a little bit more about different examples of what would be considered a normal meeting between a nurse and a manager, and then subjects that could fall under things that would happen in an investigatory meeting that could lead to discipline. So normal conversations with your manager could be, like I said earlier, your schedule change. Maybe you put in for a trade, vacation request. Maybe you need to talk to the manager about a leave of absence. Maybe it's time for your evaluation. Those are all normal conversations you need to have alone with your manager, and people meet with their managers all the time. Also, if you're a preceptor on the floor, or maybe you have unit council and you're the member of unit council, the manager might want to talk to you about that. Again, a normal meeting between a manager and a nurse. Some of the things that fall under investigatory meetings could be a patient or coworker complaint. Maybe you have attendance issues. Maybe you're coming in late, leaving early, missing too many shifts. Attendance can cover many things. If you have Epic at your hospital, issues with your Epic scores, charting, and then the two big ones, of course, would be theft or drug diversion. Those are just some of the examples of things that could fall under possible discipline or normal meetings. It's not a complete list, but you see where I'm going with them, okay? And if you ever have any doubt about where something falls, your manager asks you to meet with something and you're wondering, call your union steward, tell them what the subject's about, and ask them, do I go alone? Should I bring you? They're there for you to ask questions. As far as Weingarten rights, on the union board, sometimes you'll see an explanation of how to ask for your Weingarten rights. There's actual formal paragraph you can say, and I'm going to read that for you right now. I believe this discussion could lead to me being disciplined. I therefore request that my union rep be present to assist me at the meeting. I further request reasonable time to consult with my union rep regarding the subject and purpose of the meeting. So that's the official thing you can say when you're asking for a steward. You don't have to worry about having the proper terms. What you need to just say is, I want a steward. I need to find a steward. I'm going to want a steward to be present. And again, remember, it's not up to management whether or not you bring the steward. It's up for you to say, I want a steward, and then you need to call the chair or call a steward to find somebody who is available. And this does take time, and you have the right to do that. So your manager has asked you to meet with them. Let's say it is about something to do with your attendance. Now, I might think about, for a minute, I might pause and think about, I have a great relationship with my manager. She's a friend of mine. I don't need to bring a steward. I haven't done anything wrong. I'll be fine. Those are all thoughts that might go through your head. It is possible, though, when you go into these meetings, that you might not anticipate some of the questions that they're going to ask. You might be confused on what you have to answer or what you don't have to answer. And one of the things when you have a union steward present, it gives you that witness, and that witness of what's being said Usually the meeting goes better because your steward is acting as the witness. The steward's going to help the meeting be more fair and focused, okay? There are questions you're going to have before the meeting and after the meeting. And once you have the steward in the room with you, they're going to be able to answer those questions a lot better if they were present than if you're trying to recap what happened during the meeting. Think of the meeting in 3 steps. There's usually the pre-meeting, okay? You've called the steward. The steward might ask you a few questions about what's going on. They're going to hopefully remind you to listen carefully to the questions, and they possibly will be giving you some other helpful advice. As the nurse heading into this meeting, we want you to be brief with your answers. Don't guess. It's okay to say, I don't know, I don't remember. This meeting is your chance to give your side of the story. You want to be polite. Management does have the right to pull you into one of these meetings. So think about before the meeting with your steward to have a quick pre-meeting to get any last minute questions answered. Then you go into the actual meeting. It's usually in the manager's office. There's usually 4 people in the room. You, the steward, the manager, and often the manager will bring a witness themselves. We usually sit on one side of the table, they sit on the other side of the table. The manager is going to start asking you questions that you need to answer. There is a possibility during the meeting, if needed, to take a caucus. Some people take a caucus if they have a question for their steward. It's usually a quick caucus that you would step out of the room. The steward might also call a caucus if the room becomes too heated or if you get emotional. Sometimes people are under pressure and they can get emotional. So the steward has taken training and they know what to do in these meetings and they'll help you get through it. Generally, these meetings last anywhere from a half hour to an hour. When the meeting gets over, you're going to walk out with the steward, and while you guys are walking off the floor, you're going to have a quick discussion. That's what we call the post-meeting, okay? Hopefully you know, but I'm going to tell you, the steward's going to be with you through the process. If there's going to be a second meeting, the steward will be there with you. That's the time for you to ask any quick questions. The stewards don't know the outcome. They can't guess what management's going to do, but they will be sure to review with you what the next steps are if there is a follow-up plan. One thing you should think about from being in the meeting, if management has asked you not to talk about anything that occurred in the meeting, I would advise you not to do that. You don't want to go out and start talking on the floor to the different nurses about the manager or about the process when they're deciding next steps. If you need to debrief or talk to anybody, talk to somebody at home. But if management has asked you not to talk about it, I would advise you to respect that, okay? The other thing that sometimes happens in those meetings while they're asking you questions, especially if it's about a patient complaint or charting, they might talk about the patient's chart and they might talk about you looking at it with your manager. That may happen, it may not, but just remember, you as a nurse cannot go back and look at the patient's chart alone, right? That would be a HIPAA violation. And unfortunately, sometimes our members do that after a meeting like this. So I'm here to remind you, do not go back and look at the patient's chart by yourself. We don't want to add to everything else that's going on and create a HIPAA violation. The best thing you can do is keep in touch with the steward. If the management team or anybody from HR contacts you, you contact the steward. If they contact the steward, they will contact you. There maybe won't be a second meeting. Maybe they'll send you an email. Maybe they'll try to talk to you in person, but you definitely want to get the steward in the loop if any of that happens. So those are your basic rights. Those are your basic responsibilities and your choices for reaching out to get a steward to help you and to be part of the process. One of the things that we struggle with is having our M&A members know about their Weingarten rights. So you can actually help people that work on your unit, okay? If you're ever present when a coworker talks about an upcoming meeting they have with their manager, share with them what you now know. Encourage them to call a union steward. If they've already had the meeting and they didn't have a union steward with them, still encourage them to call the steward. Those are things you can do to help teach your coworkers about their Weingarten rights. You can also help by sharing this podcast with others that you work with. The more we teach our members about their Weingarten rights, the less we will have problems with members going in alone with management. And that always sets us back for helping members when they go in alone with management. I'll leave you with one last thought. I've never had an M&A member regret bringing a steward with them to an investigatory meeting, but I've had plenty of members regret not bringing a steward with them. So as always, your M&A chairs and stewards and labor reps are your best resources for any follow-up questions on your Weingarten rights. And as always, the best place to see what other classes M&A is offering online or in person is on the M&A website.
Thanks for listening to M&A Power in Practice. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through your favorite streaming service so that you don't miss a single episode. Want to get in touch? Email power.practice@mnnurses.org for more information.